is I want to know, if I'm given just this inequality, where for what x values is y negative. And so if I take a look at this, I first look to see, and what this says right here, since it's less than or equal to 0, I want y to be negative or equal to 0. So the equal means it includes the x-axis. So if I go to graph this guy, and I want to graph y equals x plus 1 squared times x minus 1, I know that the zeros are x equal negative 1 and x equal positive 1. X equal negative 1 is multiplicity 2. X equal 1 is multiplicity 1. So I know that if I'm going to graph this thing, that at x equal negative 2, the graph touches. And so we have a parabola, or negative 1, excuse me. And at x equal positive 1, it's multiplicity 1, the graph crosses, and we have a line. In behavior, this guy is degree 3, with a leading coefficient which is positive. So this guy goes from bottom to top. It's odd multiplicity, so BT, alphabetical order. So if I go to graph this, I put my 2 zeros on. This is a parabola, this is a line. It comes up from the bottom, touches, comes back down, crosses like a line, and then goes back out, bottom to top. Now if I want to know where this graph is negative, I notice the graph is negative, so y is negative, goes to negative 2, negative 1, since it bounces, it stays negative. So here's my 2 zeros, negative 1 and positive 1. It stays negative. Then the graph crosses and it moves to positive. It includes the 0, so that's a solid dot. So that says my answer ends up being y is negative from minus infinity to negative 1, include, union, include negative 1 to 1, include, since it includes the x-intercepts, or we would normally write it negative infinity to positive 1, because it includes the x-intercepts. So my answer from the graph is minus infinity to 1. And y is negative for those x values. Now forget the graph. This is the key, this is the key, this is the key, this is the key. The key to these problems is the x-intercepts. Because if the graph is negative and the graph touches, then if y is negative, it stays negative. If y is negative and the graph crosses, y moves from negative to positive. Everything goes with the x-intercepts. So if we forget the fact that we've got a graph, and you say, well, what am I going to do? The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find the x-intercepts. Now I do that by taking y and setting it equal to 0. So I will take x plus 1 squared times x minus 1, set it equal to 0. This means y equals negative 1, not y, x equals negative 1, x equals 1. This is multiplicity 2, so the graph touches. This is multiplicity 1, so the graph crosses. I need to know what do they want me to find. By the way, in calculus, we're looking for both positive and negative, because positive and negatives will have specific meaning to us. But here it says I want y negative or equal to. Now instead of drawing a T-bar chart, I'll just draw a number line. Now on the number line I put the x-intercepts. Since it's equal to 0, which means it includes the x-intercepts, what I get out of finding the x-intercepts are solid dots, which means they include. So at negative 1 and 1 are my x-intercepts. It includes negative 1 and it includes 1. That means square bracket. This takes my number line and breaks it up into 3 pieces, where either y is positive or y is negative. At negative 1, I notice that the graph touches. If the graph touches, there is no change in sign. So NC means no change in y. So if y is negative, it stays negative. At 1, the graph crosses, and that means that y changes sign. So all I need to do is to pull a test point, and I'm going to pull my favorite as a test, which is x equals 0, and I'm going to check to see. If x equals 0, is x plus 1 squared times x minus 1, is that positive or negative? Well, that's 0 plus 1 squared times 0 minus 1, which is 1 times minus 1. It's a negative number. Y is negative. The only way it can go positive is if it interacts with the x-axis, and it doesn't. Now, y crosses the x-axis here. So if y is negative, it's going to change to positive. Here, y touches the x-axis, which means there's no change in sign. It stays negative. I'm going to pick up negative, because that's what it wants me to find. And off of the number line, my answer is minus infinity includes negative 1 to 1. So the answer is minus infinity to 1, all inclusive, because it includes that line. More tomorrow.